My name is Dave. I am a community lead over at Mux. We make video APIs. Jeff, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Jeff Everhart. I'm a developer advocate with Knock, and we build notifications infrastructure so you don't have to.
I love that we can reduce both of our company, like, what is it that you do, to like just a couple lines. And of course, it's infinitely complex from there. But this is a really interesting
Yes.
crossover that we get to talk about today, which is how do we connect video APIs with notifications in the territory of notifications? How there's so many moving parts and things that happen in a video platform that our end users might be interested in knowing about. And that's kind of where Knock comes in. Maybe you could share a little bit more about Knock and what y'all are up to over there.
Yeah, so Knock, like I said, is notifications infrastructure. And the idea is that you can add different notification providers as channels, right? So we can construct these sort of like multi-channel workflows using email, SMS, push, chat apps like Slack and Discord. And then we also power our own real-time in-app feed. Um, and I guess the idea here and the genesis of Knock, I'll tell a little origin story because I think it's important and ties into the video idea. So our co-founders, Sam and Chris, were both sort of senior product and engineering leaders at Frame.io, the video collaboration platform. And so they spent a bunch of time building out that product. They both worked on the notification aspects of that collaboration platform. And so sort of like as that, I think that company ended up getting acquired by Adobe. As they were sort of looking for their next step, they said, hey, why don't we go build the notifications platform that we would have built, like if we sort of knew all the ins and outs from the beginning. So it's a really interesting tie into the video piece, and I think like that you'll see brought through in a lot of Knox different offerings. The idea that this is definitely a battle tested system because they've seen all these problems, have this really deep knowledge of the product space. But what it does for developers is it really allows you to sort of orchestrate these thoughtful notification patterns. So it's not really just, I'm going to send an email here, I'm going to send an SMS message here. As you kind of see when we dig into the workflow engine, there's a lot of nuance to what we can orchestrate using Knock, and it's super easy to tap into.
I love these products. Every time I stumble across a product like this that it has the infrastructure very complicated and a lot of moving parts to this kind of infrastructure, and kind of packages it up into these smaller niceties that can sort of drop into your application with minimal code, minimal fuss, and then still have the extensibility to be able to do the hard things or the nitty gritty when you really need them to. So I'm pumped to dig into this one today a little bit more. So I just want to show here at the beginning, what is it that we're going to look at? So we're building in this app today. We always pick some kind of fictional app that we're going to dig into. And today's MyTube, a new idea that I have for $1 billion business, where you can follow some of your favorite creators and get access to the latest content that they're putting out. So this particular layout is probably pretty familiar to what this looks like, but here's what's missing up here. We have this smash that subscribe and like button, and we have this bell, but none of it works. It's just kind of stubbed out right now. And I thought we could talk through how that you could take these buttons and take these areas of that are clearly wired up or meant to be used for notifications and actually get them working under the hood from upload, really, to as soon as that video is uploaded to Mux, we would get some event information about that upload. And then how do we get that into Knock territory and actually wire it up to a front-end application? So this will be a good sneak peek here at what we're looking at building. And if you got any other thoughts over there, Jeff, otherwise maybe we should just start digging in.
No, yeah, I mean, just there are so many video use cases, and like I know obviously we have the subscriber pattern that we're going to talk about today too, but the other one that I kind of want to bring in and have stubbed out in some of my examples is more of like a Loom or like Vidyard use case where we're sharing these assets with people and we want sort of engagement data back of who's watching them, sort of how long they've watched for. So that's just kind of like another way that you can take, I think, the video space nowadays, and we'll look at what some of those patterns will look like in Knock.
Yeah, yeah. Let's think about that really quick. That in terms of where events come from in a video platform, there's really a couple of different areas. There's the actual player itself and interactions that are happening on the page when, for example, the video is clicked on to play or seeked, or the video has ended in the video player. These are all events that you might care about as, you know, as a creator or as an admin of the platform that you're building out, is when or what's happening, who's interacting with my videos. And there's also like sort of admin side of things where when a video is uploaded, or let's say like a downloadable rendition is ready to go and has been prepared in the background, you might want to know that that's ready to go. You've been waiting for that next upload. And so those are all kind of like server side asynchronous sort of events that you might be waiting on and care about, are happening in the background. And then there's also like this kind of post view sort of notification of where Mux data is really kind of interesting for this. So there's would be kind of a summary of that view, what all happened during that session, what device, where was it actually located. You can kind of take all of that data and pick out the parts that you care about as a notification and throw those into a notification channel as well. So there's all kinds of places, I guess that was what I'm saying.
Yep.
For where you
So
can
many
be.
use cases.
It's just kind of up to you what you want to decide to be notified about. So we'll look at a couple of those today. But I want to drive some of this too from the Mux webhooks, because a lot of our communication with third-party applications happens asynchronously via webhooks. As soon as something happens in the Mux API platform, when you upload a video or your users upload a video, you can get additional awareness. You become aware that that video is ready to go via a webhook, and that would just be a simple request that's sent from the Mux servers over to your own API that contains information about whatever event was sent over. So there's all, like I said, all kinds of different events that you can get notified of. Hey, you know, this user just began their live stream. This user just uploaded a new video. Everything to maybe even errors. Like you might want to know if somebody tried to upload a video and it didn't actually work correctly because they chose an invalid file type or something like that. So all kinds of places to start. But what we're going to look at today, like you said, we'll look at some of the player events, and we'll also look at some of these, like video is ready to watch from a creator, and use that kind of payload to then transform it into knock notification territory.
Yeah.
Cool. So sometimes the sidebar is a little tricky there. There it is. Okay. So we have a code base here ready to go. And this is basically what's happening under the hood for this little video app that we put together. There's just a page, and nothing's really wired up on this page. It's just a layout that has some static text on it, and an area there that has a bell icon and some subscribe buttons. Then there's also the Mux player as well. So if you were to take a look here, and this will be open source on our examples repo as well, but digging into this player component, we're using Mux Player React drop-in video player for Mux assets right in the React ecosystem.
The drop-in components is just such a fantastic movement. Like the more and more stuff we can componentize, the better. And that's definitely something we're leaning into at Knock as well. Like what you'll see here and definitely in the future is like, what sorts of interactions can we just abstract away into this component that a developer can take, you know, with minimal config and like drop into an app.
It is pretty wild. Like to think that what's really happening here is a pretty complex rendering of video and the correct compatibility, and all of that is abstracted to ultimately this is my maybe bad
one line of code. I mean,
it's kind of one line of code that's happening right here. So we're dropping in a Mux player, we're using a playback ID for a specific asset over on Mux, and we're seeing that video show up. If we go back to that demo app, we have this full video player here. So let's see what we would do with this player, how we can wire that up. And then we'll also take a look at this route handler. This is just a generic API route handler in Next 14 that when it receives a post request, have some just kind of common code that happens for every Mux webhook that you try to handle, at least in over here in Next. We take the headers, we take a look at the body, we make sure that it's actually valid by just double checking against the Mux webhook secret, which just again is like another layer of security to make sure that the webhook that's coming in is actually from Mux and not being produced by anybody else. And then we're ready to go. We can just take a look at what those different events are and somehow, some way, hand them off to Knock. Now, I just really yanked this from your guys's docs. So we're seeing that
Yeah.
some of this is kind of stubbed out. There's some kind of dinosaurs getting
Yeah,
let
a
loose
lot of our
here.
examples tend to feature Jurassic Park characters and scenarios. So it's at least something that's somewhat familiar to folks and kind of makes them chuckle at the same time. So
Very good.
that's what that is. Yeah. But this, so there are a couple of ways, and I'll just kind of speak broadly about knock, and then we can like get into it. So there's a couple of ways that you can make this workflow trigger happen, right? I think this is an example using the Node SDK, but pretty much all of our SDKs, which we have in, I think pretty much, I'm not going to say all, but most backend languages, like Go, PHP, Python, Ruby, Elixir. We support all those. And basically all of those boil down to REST API calls through our REST API endpoint. So if you want to go that route and sort of just construct your own, you're absolutely free to do all of that as well. So it gives us really like there's no limit to, I think, where you could implement knock and how you would implement it in whatever system you want. And then we also have some React components too that we can take a look at.
Awesome. I'm going to bring up your screen here now, and we'll
Okay,
see
cool.
what kind of tour you can get going on your side.
Yeah, sure. I might just start real quick in the knock dashboard if that's all right, and then hop back into the code. Does that sound like a plan?
Perfect.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so like I said, the idea, really the heart of knock is this workflow engine. And when we say a workflow, what that means is that we sort of create this sequence of steps using either different channels, right? Like these downstream providers like SendGrid, or our own in-app channel, or a push channel, SMS, whatever you want, you can configure each one of those individually and even have multiple email providers in here, like if you ever wanted to do that. But what we do is we construct workflows with channel steps and then these logical function steps. So we get these things like delays, batching, fetching, which allows us to augment our workflow run with data from an external HTTP endpoint. We can branch to create these really elaborate if-else scenarios inside of this visual builder. Then we can also throttle. In throttle, you mentioned errors and error messages and things like that. We see people use the throttle step for that a lot because essentially that limits how many workflow executions basically get through that throttle. So that's sort of how like the guts of knock, right, is this workflow engine. But there are all sorts of other things that are layered on top of that that we'll sort of like get into, I think, as we go. But right here, let me hop back out and we'll go and look at, go back to workflows. And we'll go into our new view workflow real quick and just take a look at what that looks like. And you can see here that we're making this basic API trigger call, which is sort of that code example we just looked at. And then we're proceeding to send a message to an in-app step and then to this SendGrid endpoint. So let me click into this real quick, and I'll show you some additional features on that are a part of each step, right? So we've got this in-app step, which Knock manages, and this is powered by WebSockets. And so that's a managed step or managed provider that we have. And each message step or each channel step has a template associated with it. So like I can, decide what that looks like. And this is a huge benefit to large teams because like, if you're sending emails with SendGrid, a lot of times your email template might live inside of a code base. And so what the template editor does is it allows these larger teams to sort of collaborate outside of the code base on these message templates. So we've got the message template that's tied to each channel step, but then we also have something called conditions. And so the idea is that we want to be really thoughtful with Knock and how we send users notifications. And so looking at this example flow right here, I'm basically, triggering two different notifications anytime somebody, we would fire this new view workflow. And, maybe we don't want that. And maybe we just want them to see this once and don't want them to get an email if they don't have to. So if we come down here to the SendGrid step, we can add a condition here where we can basically look at the status of the workflow run, where we can basically look at this in-app feed, say, has this in-app feed message been seen, and we can skip that. Sorry, has not been seen. Yeah, so we can, we're only going to send that if this in-app message has been seen. So we can do these really thoughtful things. We also have this concept of send windows if you kind of want to time box, when your users would receive certain notifications. So like if you only wanted them to receive emails 9 to 5 through, Monday through Friday, that would allow you to do that. So cool, that's the basics of building a workflow. So we'll just go ahead, and I don't think we made any changes here, so we'll just kind of leave it as is. And actually, let's go ahead and commit this to development. And then let's hop out into the code and sort of take a look at how we would power that interaction through the front end application. So let's see. Yeah, I think we need to, I'm just going to close out a couple of things real quick, and then we'll get into just what we need. See, my tabs expand endlessly in VS Code as well as Chrome. Sorry.
Welcome to the life as a
developer.
developer.
Exactly. All right. Okay, so we definitely want to open up this on play route. So this is sort of the API route that's going to trigger everything. And I think the other thing that I wired up was inside of the player component, right? So I think the first thing that we'll talk about is just sort of this basic, that use case I mentioned with Vidyard or like a Loom, where somebody views something and you want to get a notification about it. So really, we've just attached this on play handler to the Mux player. And all that's going to do is just pass some data to this API endpoint that I created. And we're just going to pass in like a video ID and a video test. And this route here, this is what this looks like. So I'm importing our Knock node client, then just sort of configuring that. And then I'm using this workflows.trigger method to trigger this new view workflow. And then I can pass in some data. So I can pass in a list of recipients, and I can trigger a workflow really for either one person or multiple people. And so I can pass that in as either a list of IDs or these user objects like you see up here. And then I can also pass in, there's a bunch of different options, but the only one we'll sort of talk about in this scenario is the data. And this is just basically like a custom payload. So this is you being able to pass in whatever data you want that you need to use inside of your notification workflow or inside of the templates. And let's actually hop back on here and let's look at what this template looks like real quick. And really it's just going to say, hey, first name, recipient first name. And I think, Dave, I loaded you in here as a Knock user, and I think I've also got myself. So as you're editing these templates, you get this access to this variable pane where you can sort of see all of the values that are available for use inside of a particular template. So we've got, hey, recipient first name, this user watched your video, and those two things are what are getting passed in as a part of that data payload. And now that's going to go to this in-app step. So I'll take us on one more code detour, and then I'll sort of show it in action. Now that is going to be inside of this feed container component. And here I've just basically imported a bunch of our React components from our React package. And if we go out to the app, that should be sort of functional already, right? There's nothing in that feed right now. But if I click this bell icon, we can see that we get this nice rendered component. We've even got dark mode. It's kind of, not as dark as I think the background that we've got for the rest of the app, but you can toggle that by just passing this different prop on the feed provider. And then I'll sort of walk you through how all these different components knit together, because we have a couple of different drop-in components that we offer. The notification feed is one of them. We also just released some Slack components, actually, that help you sort of set up Slack connections and associate those connections with like different channels in Slack workspaces. So it's really cool. Takes a really manual process down to, just like an hour or so to implement these. But so we have this top level Knock provider, which is basically where you're just passing in your credentials, right? We're saying, here's the API key to access this API. Here's the user ID of the feed that I want to get, right? So is this Jeff? Is this Dave? Whose feed are we fetching when we do that? And then we've got this second level provider that is specific to the feed. And that takes this feed ID and then a couple of other options. You could also pass in different filter options here, like if you wanted to get more results or less results, or you wanted to filter to just data that was sent in a particular payload. There's lots of cool things you can do that way. And then these two are basically our drop-in components, right? We've got the notification icon button. And then in this implementation, we've got sort of the popover variant, right? Where I've just got this and I sort of hover over this. We also have like a more full page inbox component that I believe is just called notification feed. And so those things all just read from this feed provider. And then as we trigger workflows and stuff gets put into that feed, this will update in real time. So like if I come over here, click watch the video, we can see that notification gets passed through.
So
And
cool.
we get test user, watched your video test. And if I do it a couple more times, like I think this is maybe like a little simplistic of an example because we probably want to be capturing more data here, but you see every time I'm click and play, something gets added to that feed. It just sort of increments there. And then we can also manage those different message statuses, right? So right now these are unread, not archived. And so we could come through and read them, also archive them so that they don't show up in the feed again if we refresh. But all this is sort of powered under the hood by Nock's own WebSocket infrastructure. So it's super cool. And any kind of questions or anything you want me to unpack there? I know
There's
I
just
just went
so
on like
much in
a
like
tour de force.
no, but it's amazing again how much you can kind of abstract away all the complexity and just drop in those components and
Yeah.
have this whole thing wired up and make sense in like what was that 10 minutes or something like that.
Yeah. And this
So
is literally the example I copied off of our docs page. So it's not like I did anything crazy here. It's just like drop this in, import the packages. You got to kind of wire it up, point it at the right feed. But you get a lot of functionality out of the box with this particular component and interaction.
yeah, yeah. And one other thing that I keep thinking about here too is that it's also we haven't explored this at all, but it's possible to also set metadata on Mux player as well. So that
Yes, I noticed that.
when that view occurs, that also would get captured in the Mux data side of things. So if you do need to kind of tie things all together in some way of the video view over a Mux to the record or the indication, the notifications that are happening over on Knock, there's some really interesting and easy ways to sort of have that data exist in all of the areas that you need it to live, which is pretty neat.
Yep, for sure. And that's kind of a good segue to maybe be talking about users in Knock for a second, because that is kind of an important part of the model. So because we're a notification platform, obviously it's kind of best. What we do essentially is sort of create a cache, we call it, of user data that's relevant to like them being notified. And so I just went and hand created these two users. But you can also do what's called inline identification. So if I come back into this example right here and like I swap this out for John Hammond, I would just sort of create a Knock user on the fly. And what we recommend doing there is like the user ID in Knock should probably be the UUID you use in your application to identify that user, just so it's easy. And what we can do there is we can store all these different properties on a particular user. Some are relevant, obviously, like email address, the phone number, the locale, and the time zone. Like if you wanted to do translations, we support translated notifications. So like, if you stored their locale and did translations, that would become relevant there. And the time zone would be relevant for like time zone specific sends. Obviously, like with that send windows feature I showed a second ago. That's time zone aware, right? So when I say 9 a.m., it's 9 a.m. in that user's time zone as long as you've set it. So it really like solves a bunch of these problems for people out of the box in just such an interesting way that it's really cool. But so let's build. You want to build off this example a little bit, and you want to make this workflow a little bit more complex, maybe?
I challenge you, Jeff. I'm
Okay,
going in here.
cool.
You did some of this work behind the scenes, and I don't know what we're getting into here. So I'm really excited to
Okay,
see
cool. Well,
where your brain
I'll
went with this.
just awesome. I'll try and highlight some cool stuff along the way. So like obviously like this use case, right? It can could get really noisy. I mean, right? If we're getting to play, especially if we had a really popular video, say for example, we might not want a notification per view. And what we can do again with Knock, like I think the best thing, and one of the things we say a lot is when people start using Knock, they actually tend to send their users fewer notifications because they have these other sort of logical function steps. So what I'm going to implement here, right? And so I clicked that video 4 times. I've got 4 different notifications up in there. And so what we're going to implement here is something called a batch step. So we'll throw this in front of our in-app step. And what the batch is going to do is it's going to look at the recipient of this workflow, and it's going to catch for however long we determine, right? And then we got a couple of options. We do fixed duration, dynamic interval. We can set a limit on it. We could set a batch key. So like right now, this is going to group all of the new views for, and I'll just say like for a minute. We'll do that for right now. So this is going to catch all of the new view workflows that I trigger for a particular user for that 1 minute. And then it's going to generate me one notification. And then I can sort of get access to all of those different activities inside of my template. And so I'm going to hop out here, and this is just a batch step, and we'll just kind of copy. See if I can find it. I think it's down here. So we get these access to these variables inside the template. And so we get this like total activities variable that we'll just copy. And I'll hop back into the workflow builder. So yep, we're going to do that. And then there's like also other ways you could do this too. So in the advanced settings, like say we wanted to batch by video and recipient, right? So like I get a batch per video. If I've got 10 videos out there, like I can create a batch per video by just sort of passing it this what's called a batch key. So I basically say, and I think I'd set this to like the video ID that I pass through my payload. And then that would catch that for us. So let me hop in here. We're going to do away with this for right now. And then we'll come down here and we'll just paste in our total activities, video views. And then, and it's worth mentioning too that this whole template editor is powered by Liquid. So that's kind of like the syntax you see there. And then we get access to these activity variables, and we can sort of loop through them. If I hop back over here, so for activity and activities, I guess we'd want to say, I shouldn't have deleted that other text. What is it? Activity dot user viewed activity dot video ID. And we'll do lowercase. All right, and then I'm going to remove this action URL right now, because that's sort of like if you wanted to link somebody out in that notification feed, we can do that. So let's go ahead and save these changes. And I don't know, I'm doing all this live, so we'll see what we get. But it's also worth talking about this additional sort of feature of Knock. So the idea behind Knock is that we wanted this to feel not like a dashboard, but like an extension of your own development environment. So with that in mind, we have this kind of commit model behind all of these different changes. So, right, you just saw me make a change to this template. Before it's sort of live and I can trigger it with the API, I need to commit it. And so I can click commit to development. I can enter, we'll change the batch. I can enter a message here. And then I can sort of see what resources that this commit modified under the hood. So you can see here this nice diff between my template. And then I can also see this is called the workflow.json file, which is basically the instructions for that particular workflow. You can see that it's sort of modified there. We added that batch step. And then like, it's worth just mentioning as an aside, but all of what you're seeing me do now, you can do a bunch of this through the CLI too. So if you actually wanted to store the templates or the JSON file inside of your code base and like, commit it with source control actions, like you can do that too. And we have a couple of different like larger enterprise people who that's their approach. And then we're also sort of looking to expand that in the future, but we can commit that.
Does this make like a knock specific type of commit, or is it related to Git commits at all?
It's not right now. No, it's modeled off of it, but it's kind of the same idea, right? That's a great question though. But if I come back down here in the same vein, right? If I look at my commit menu, I can see like my uncommitted changes. I also need to promote my changes to the next level environment. So right now we're in development. If I wanted to push these to production, I'd need to promote, like come over here and promote those changes. And then like I can also do like revert commit. So like if you do something and you don't like the result or you need to change it, you can revert a specific commit like that.
That's really cool.
And those are we're definitely looking at ways that we can tie more tightly into like people's code bases like that. And so we're exploring that with a couple of people and have some like items on the roadmap maybe to address that and like to sort of like, I don't know, bridge the gap a little bit more between what you see now and source control. Okay, so cool. So now let's see what we got, right? So we've got this, we're batching for a minute, and then we're sending to in-app an email. And I guess let's just hop out here and log some more video views and see if I did everything right. So we'll just kind of kick off a bunch of these and like, I'm not seeing it increment, so that's a good sign. right? We're
There's
still
gonna
at
be some
4.
data folks over at Mux right now that are like, why is Big Buck Bunny getting so many views all of a sudden? It's
Yes.
not usual.
And let's see, we'll kind of wait. And then actually, let me hop in here and we'll do this too, right? So we can, this is maybe a little bit of a teaser, right? So in the workflow, or sorry, in the dashboard, right? We've got this workflow runs tab. Awesome. And so what we get, and again, this, like I said, the origin of this system, right, was our co-founders like built scaled notifications for a platform, right, and ran into lots of issues where engineers would get tagged to answer the why did or didn't this person get a particular notification? Why didn't they get their password reset? Why didn't they do this? Or why did they get this email sent twice? And so observability is kind of baked in at the core of Knock. And you can sort of see that right here, right? Where all of these workflows are the ones that I just triggered. We can see that this batch one is still processing. Maybe it's completed now. Yeah, so it looks like it's completed. And so if we hop back into our app, yep, we've got one, we had our real-time feed increment. Then we can see, you know, that whole batch kind of caught all those different messages and sent us one notification with all the data instead of each of those things individually. So it's a really cool feature that tends to be a pretty popular thing that people want to do, because especially in like high volume notification apps, like maybe video, you know, I mean, video is a really good example, right? If I was getting like Loom or whatever, if I send out something and a bunch of people watch it, and I get 100 views in 10 minutes, I don't want 100 notifications in 10 minutes. Like, we need to distill this down. And so that's what the batch step allows you to do. So cool. Yeah, let me, and I guess while we're on the in-app stuff, let me make one more change real quick, if you're all right with it. So we talked about the notification feed, right? This drop-in component. But I think it's worth kind of mentioning about Knock that you can sort of like, there are multiple layers to that front-end WebSocket client, right? So we've got the notification component that I just demoed. We also have React hooks that are a little bit more generic, and then we have just a vanilla JavaScript client, right? So if you wanted to build this functionality in any framework, like that's kind of my next steps, is like, we want view examples, we want svelte examples, you know, we want to really enable people to use whatever front-end technology that they want with that client. But that also means that you can power really whatever sort of real-time UI that you wanted to. So I'm actually going to hop back in here and we'll remove this batch step real quick. And yeah, let me just delete this. Then I'll modify this template real quick. And we'll just, I don't know, we'll just send a basic notification. I don't want us to spend a ton of time here. So I know we got some cool webhook stuff to look at. So we'll do that. Go ahead and commit those changes to development. And then I'm going to come back into this feed container component. I'm just going to comment out the notification feed stuff. And I've just got this basic toasts file that it's just like React hot toasts, basically. And this is just using that, that feed client, the hook that I mentioned, and it's just going to render a bunch, you know, toasts instead of in-app notifications. But you just kind of demo that really, you know, once you get down to that level, you can render kind of anything you want. And we get a whole different experience. And we've got a bunch of people who are powering like different in-product experiences, like with the client.
Yeah, I could sort of picture that almost like when you're on I call it Twix nowadays, but when you're kind of scrolling on mobile on Twix, and then it will remind you after 10 minutes or so that there are new posts from new users.
Yeah, that's actually a great one.
But maybe even similarly in like a video UGC type landscape where folks are uploading all kinds of videos, that you might see 3 new videos from you know, the folks that you follow and dropping down.
That's actually great. Yeah, we open that batch step, right? Catch all those different new videos, render, you know, and every whatever couple of minutes, yeah, just fire off that real-time in-app event. And it's also worth mentioning that like before, you know, I was rendering a template. And actually, let me open up the console real quick, because this is kind of neat too, like just to see sort of what data we get back from these particular real-time events. Oh, let's see if I can get this up and scooch it a little bit more. And so that's what one of these looks like, right? We get all these activities, actors, we get a ton of data back, and you can even see the data that I passed in the payload. So you're really like it's up to you how you want to construct that front end message at that point, and you don't have to use the template. And so we see a lot of people do that where like, they want something more custom, or like if it's this type, if it's I don't know, reply notification, they'll have like another component that they render to do an inline reply, or whatever at that point. It's really flexible for you as a dev and whatever you want to do.
Yeah, the toast example is perfect. Like a way that you can just kind of bring in your own UI and make it work however you like.
Yeah.
That particular library, by the way, I think is pretty underrated. The React Hot Toast. I've used that a couple times
Yeah.
before, and just so easy to get those sorts of messages built into your application.
Yeah, it literally was, again, just sort of drop in. Yeah, and I've been looking at a bunch of different toasts lately, and they're actually the one I think we feature in our docs. So again, like I pretty much just copy pasted that example from our docs into this thing.
Amazing.
Awesome. Well, cool. So let's you want to transition and talk about the webhooks stuff for a little bit, and like how we could sort of power some of these subscription features?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. So what I was showing earlier was related to just the reference of the different pieces or events that can be fired off related to, video uploads or or live streams go live. And some of those payloads I pulled down into the application so that we don't have to actually upload a video to trigger the webhook. Instead, we'll just use that test payload and kind of throw that towards Knock in this way. So I think those are just in that local JSON file.
They definitely are. Okay, so cool. So let me, I've just sort of I just wired some stuff up a little bit already, and we can walk through it. So here, like I'm doing sort of exactly what you did. I didn't have a muck secret, so I sort of commented out a couple of those pieces, but exactly what you said. We're just sort of ingesting that payload, and we can actually look at this because it'd be sort of interesting to see. Like I haven't dug super deep into the video. I'm interested about these RMTP, like these URLs, like these targets. Is this something that an end user would use, or is this something that would be like more for another application to ingest? Like there's this one, and then I know there's this like RTMP YouTube
that
URL.
one's a little more administrative. It's just related to like setting up that particular live stream. This particular payload, what a user would probably care about is related to what live stream actually went active, or what went live here in this case. So it'd probably be nested under, if we look at like playback IDs, or the ID for the asset. That's generally what the end user would subscribe to understand, like, hey, this is the asset that just went live. Is this an asset, or is this asset belong to a user that I follow, or that I'm interested in seeing when they go live, that sort of thing.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And you said that would be like this ID, maybe.
That one I think is the webhook ID. But I would, if you go down just a little bit further, there's there's the ID there right under ingest type.
Oh, I see.
Then,
okay, cool.
And then the playback ID could potentially be something that like somebody could subscribe to as well. Either one of those.
Oh, neat. Okay. All right. So let's see what I got. What did I wire up? Did I wire up the new video asset ready? Let me let's do some stuff. I'm actually gonna copy this, and we'll maybe start with the live stream if that's cool. Because like I got kind of an interesting maybe like use case here for live streamers and maybe their followers and stuff like that.
Okay.
All right, so sweet. Let me hop out here. What I did is I should have wired up this subscribe button, and I didn't, so I feel like a failure, Dave. I'm sorry. But I did create this whole other page over here of like little buttons that we can just sort of trigger to like kick off some actions and sort of
I didn't even see this. This is great. Okay.
Yeah. So because there's a couple of things I wanted to do, and like I was just playing around. Like honestly, I just started having fun. So I was like, oh, let me see if I can do this, and let me see if I can do this. And so I did. And that's how we ended up here, which I feel like is most developers, like when they're just messing around with stuff, like this is how I ended up here.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk about like a live stream channel subscription pattern and how we can power that with Knock. And so Knock has this concept called objects. And objects are sort of like a catch-all thing. It's basically you get kind of like a NoSQL like data store inside of Knock. almost like, and kind of like sort of Mongo-ish under the hood, if you will. And what that allows you to do is store what we call reference objects, stuff that you might want to use in your notifications or notify people about inside of Knock, so that it's here when you sort of run through those workflows. And then what we can do is once you create some particular objects, we can then subscribe users to them. And then we can basically trigger a workflow for that object. And it's going to go ahead and fan out and notify, basically run a workflow execution for every subscriber on that particular object. So it's a really kind of elegant pattern where like I'm not managing this huge list of tables. I make this thing, attach people to it via the subscription model. And then I just trigger this workflow once for the channel or whatever. And, that'll fan out and notify everybody. And we see people use that for a lot of use cases. Like obviously, I think it's great for the video stuff. So if you got like a streamer and they've got a bunch of followers, they've got a channel, and they want to get notified of the videos, it's a great one. We see it a lot. Like I don't know, I kind of think of like Zillow maybe, where you're following a house, you get price updates, like things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and I'll open up this and just trigger this workflow real quick. I stubbed out some channels for us that will turn into Knock objects. So I just, this is our company socials. And we can store, each channel is in a collection, or sorry, each object is in a collection. This collection's unsurprisingly called channels. And then each one has an ID. And then each object can have sort of different properties, right? And this is just stuff we want to store in Knock to use maybe for our notifications later on down the road. And if I come out here to the app, I'll just click create channels. It's not really like great feedback here, but there's an API route that's firing under the hood that should create those channels for us. And then if we kind of click into there, you can see, here's that stuff. And what you would ideally do, right? So if we were really wiring these up together, like I wasn't really sure once I started looking at the Mux payload, how I'd sort of tie them together, but I would probably use that ID, right? Like, so if you have this concept of ID there, probably want to use that somewhere in like the channel ID as well, so that it maps really easily from like kind of whatever other systems you're using into this stuff.
Yeah, and one other area too that's worth mentioning here too that isn't in that particular payload, and I should have thought about this up front, but we also have this concept of pass through that is very similar to, I think, what you're describing with custom properties, where you can pass basically whatever you want to exist alongside of that particular video asset or live stream. And that would come through in a pass-through property. So that could include, user IDs or any sort of additional metadata that provides any extra context that you might need to associate with that asset or live stream. So that might be a good place to like stuff in a user ID and then have that correlate to custom property over in Knock.
Yeah, for sure. Or I'm thinking too, like maybe like, I don't know if you have end user URLs of where the stream or like the video channel, like stuff like that, because that's sort of what I did here. Yeah, all those things would be kind of really cool to pass through. And yeah, if you just duplicate it in Knock, and sometimes you don't need it. Like that's it too. Like maybe you just need a top level thing. And like for some people, objects are just an ID in a collection, right? And the properties that you need here are passed in via some other method. So like that's totally acceptable. It's really up to you, like, and how much you want to store in Knock versus how much you want to store somewhere else or in whatever other source system. So that created our objects, and now we would need to add user subscriptions. And I got like a little webhook right here to do that. So I just pulled both of our Knock user IDs out here. And then on the subscriptions, I can also add additional properties, which is kind of neat, so that you can really customize subscriber notifications. And so like in this example, right, say we both subscribe to these two streams, but Dave's paid for the all access pass and Jeff's just a regular user. We can pass those in as like custom properties on these subscriptions. And then we just use that Node.js client to, on this object, we'll just pass in, get our channels collection, pass in the channel ID, pass in the recipients that we want to add there, and then any custom properties we want to appear on that subscription. And here I'm just like doing some nested for loops to make that happen. And please nobody yell at me about nested for loops. So we'll do that, and I'll just come out here and click create subscriptions. It's going to run that API route under the hood. And then if we come back into Knock and sort of refresh here, and come over to like subscriptions on the Mux channel, we should see that, you know, both of us are added there. And then we can sort of look at our different properties. And then what this allows us to do is just, like I said, create some interesting sort of customized workflows. So I've got this like new stream workflow, which I'll head back into our webhook thing. And yeah, we'll swap this out for stream. And then what we could do is, I don't know, say for example, like we wanted to create a branch, right? We wanted to give our subscribers totally different notification experiences. I don't know, maybe you, Dave, as an all access guest, get early access. You know before I do when the stream's happening or when the video is going to start. So we can do that, and we can come in here and throw a condition on this. And this is going to be on the recipient, and then it's going to be subscription. SCRIP, yeah, dot role, right? That's what I called it, hopefully. And then we'll say is equal to this all access. Let me double check that real quick. Let's hop back out here. No, those are my subscriptions. Yeah, all access. All right. Subscription.role, yep. And so that when we execute this workflow, we get access to all those subscription properties too on that user. So it's like you sort of start joining all this stuff together, and you get a bunch of data that's available to you in your template that you can use there. So we'll go ahead and throw that here. So if it does this, if you're an all access subscriber, you should go down branch 1, and then we'll come out here, and I guess we'll just send this to like an in-app feed. And then what we'll do here is maybe we could, like, I don't know, throw a 15-minute delay. That's kind of long for on stream. So we'll just simulate it, throw a 1-minute delay, and then throw another in-app message here. And then we could, I don't know, maybe we'll just use the default, trigger this, and then we can sort of talk through some more stuff about webhooks. All right, so we committed that to development, and that means that Dave should get a notification immediately. Mine's going to delay for a second. And we can come back in here, we'll come over here into my app, and then I think I've sort of got these wired up to pass through those webhook payloads. So if I click this new stream button, we should get some output over here. So if I click new stream, we'll see, yeah, we pass through that Mux webhook. And then we see that like live stream started feedback in the console. And then if we come over here to workflow runs, looks like that's processing. Yep, cool. So we see it triggered it on this, and then it's sort of just waiting for me because like obviously you got your early access notification. And so we can come in here and, like, I think I mentioned this already, but like observability is kind of a big thing. And it's kind of neat to actually like visualize what happens in some of these workflows. So like you can see here that we did this trigger. You can like actually follow the path that this notification took to get to your inbox.
That's cool.
And then something I haven't mentioned, which there are like a million things about Knock that I could talk about. So I'm like trying to scope what I'm going to talk about here. But we also evaluate people's preferences, right? So we have this whole API that lets you upload basically like a JSON schema that maps to different preferences in Knock. And so people can sort of opt in or opt out of different channels, opt in or opt out of workflows or workflow categories. And so we sort of surface that here too. So like, again, really trying to answer that question, why did something get sent or why didn't it? And giving you and your support team like all the tools that you need to debug that. So cool. I know I took up a lot of time sort of showing off Knock. Anything else kind of we want to take a side tangent on? I know we've only got like 10 minutes left. So
this has been kind of mind-blowing to me to like think every time you're showing like a new piece here, I keep thinking of like, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if we did like took that on top of this, and then it turns into this
yeah,
like
well, we'll definitely have to set up a part 2. Like, let's do it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I wanted to know about like the different channels that are built in. I mean, it seems like there's the primitives are there for you to kind of notify anything to anywhere. But is there anything like what I love are these little drag and drop pieces that just allow you to kind of no code it in a little,
Yeah.
get to production in a way that doesn't require you to have to commit anything to your code base. So I was just curious about like what else do you have in terms of channels that you can just kind of drop in
Oh yeah.
and notify?
That's great. Yeah, that's a great question. So up here, we've got a bunch of different integrations, and so I'll just sort of walk you through them. So we've got support all these different email providers. The in-app one is really just us. That's our right now, our only managed channel, right? So Knock owns that. We own all the infrastructure. Basically, what we do in these other scenarios is we pass that message off to the downstream providers, and we handle a lot of stuff on the back end, right? So like each one of these email providers has different methods for determining like, was this read, was it seen, was it delivered, and so we like normalize all that stuff and give you sort of one singular API to do that. And then again, when you store that in Knock, you get access to those same conditions, right? And I think email and a couple others have that functionality where I could make a subsequent workflow step dependent on the outcome of the email steps, like was this seen after 10 days, and then maybe I want to do something. But we also handle retries, right? So if like there's a failure, we're sending it to the downstream provider that will do, I think it's like exponential back off retries for a while. So we really make sure that your notifications get sent, and that like a network outage or whatever like isn't gonna cause somebody to drop a notification. So we do email, in-app, push. We support Firebase cloud messaging, Apple push notification service, and Expo. You can sort of just combine them there, and it'll store, depending on what token stored, it'll figure out which how to send it. We do SMS providers, which I didn't demo today. Chat is Slack, Microsoft Teams, Discord, WhatsApp. And then, like I said, we actually we've recently launched some Slack components that, I'm not joking, and maybe I'll come back. Maybe we wire something up to Slack one day, but you drop them into your app, you sort of point it at these different Knock resources. You point it at a tenant, which is an organizational concept in Knock, and then you point it at an object, which is like your channel representation, right? And the components basically handle all of the OAuth for you. So like all you got to do is drop this thing in, provide it the right configuration values, which in Slack's case is quite a lot, because like, we've got here, the Slack app ID, the Slack client ID, a client secret. So there are some steps to like set that up. But once you do, you drop those components in, you sort of tell it in Knock, like map it to your data model in Knock, and then, Knock handles the rest. It manages the whole OAuth consent process, stores that access token for you. We've got a component so that, like I'm just thinking like, at the organizational level, you might have the auth component. Then at one level lower, you might have like a channel picker. And somebody could go in and say, I want notifications in this channel, and this channel, and Knock sort of handles the rest. I think that was it. Let me see. We've got, I missed one, webhook, and then we've just got this sort of generic webhook channel where we can, if you just want to send some data out to any other service. And so what we see people do with a lot of this is like when we don't have something supported as like a first party integration, you can use that to do it. So I was messing around, did like a Twilio voice example where I sent, a voice message through that because it's not directly supported yet.
Yeah, these are all, again, like we kind of see the primitives. I keep going back to this feeling of like I can connect anything to anything here. Like it seems like I'm not really restricted by really too much other than just like use case or what I can think of is going to be valuable for the business that I'm working on, or the app that I'm working on.
Yeah,
you could see like how this would quickly turn into a full-time job if you were to like tackle this on your own. Like if you were to try to build this sort of infrastructure and manage this and figure out and have the observability into it, like it seems like from an engineer's perspective, this is a lot of work that's getting reduced to a lot of really nice, just kind of snap in components and click on these, add a few settings here, and you're done, which is kind of a dream come true, I think, for a lot of engineers. So
yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because like that's definitely the point. Was like I think our co-founders watched what it took to build this internally, and said there's got to be a better way, and to do all that while sort of scaling reliably, I think especially is difficult, and to achieve like some of the nuanced stuff, because like and I joke that I came to work at Knock because like I actually hate notifications. So I'm like the guy who's got all of everything silenced, like I don't really want to be bothered. And so like the appealing thing for me was like how sort of respectful it can be of a user's attention with the preferences, with the batching steps and things like that, where it's like, hey, we don't need to spam them with all these different notifications, and let's
Right.
send it to this thing. And then we'll check again in 5 hours. And if they haven't seen this in-app notification, then we'll send them an email. Where before it was like, all right, cool, we're going to send an in-app notification, an email, and SMS all at the same time. It's like, boom, where, just, I don't know, overload sometimes.
Totally. And the alternative is not great either, right? Like especially if you're trying to build a business or build this into your application, and if you have these important events that are occurring, like an upload or going live, and nobody knows about them, then what good is it at all? Anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's important to thoughtfully kind of put together these notifications that will build a stickier product that you're working on and going to have your users coming back for more. So I think it is easy to have, like, I'm also a little notification averse myself, but
yeah,
it's because I feel like folks, we've been kind of trained to have notifications not be very thoughtful. So I think that's a really
exactly.
underappreciated comment that you have there right at the end. It was just like, yeah, what can we do to batch this and be thoughtful, but still provide the value for the folks that care about knowing that this stuff's going on. So yeah, this has been really cool.
Really that batch thing to me is like just a great example of that, where it's like, do I want 100 notifications in 10 minutes, or do I want one that says, hey, you got a lot of activity, like check it out somewhere else when I want to. Yeah, so we should definitely do a round 2 of this if you're up for it. Like the video use case, I think, is just so great, and I'd love to spend some time building out some more of these resources.
It's infinite, man. Yeah, I'm gonna keep thinking about what else we could try to show off here, and maybe we'll find out if anybody's got any additional comments on this one. But Jeff, this has been, I mean, mind blowing to me. I feel like I learned a lot in the past hour. So thanks for sharing, and hopefully you got a little bit of up level with video on your side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Like Mux is just super cool. I'm actually like, I don't know, kind of want to go and build our own like personalized video resource center for a lot of this stuff, just because like the player customizations just look awesome. I think you can do so many cool things there. So yeah, definitely.
Well, you know where to look. You know who to email if you.
I know the video guys. Yes.
You know the video guys. You also know the Disco Dogs guys, because or I should say team, because we are a big team over here, and we do care about dogs. So of course I'm going to play our Disco Dogs on the way out. But Jeff, thanks for joining.
Solid.
And
yeah, thanks for having me.
See you folks next time. Bye.